kick it off and get us started. Here is the overview of where we are headed tonight. We are going to be talking about what it means to be a transformational literacy leader. I'm all about transformation. It's not about information, it's about transformation. And we're going to do that through the lens of the science of implementation. We cannot get work done unless we understand how to implement the work. And so we're going to take this roadmap that has been designed, 95% group designing this roadmap that is going to take us through how we are going to achieve transformational outcomes. So let's take a poll real quick, and Barbara's going to launch this poll, and so that will get fired up. Everybody respond to the poll, and our poll is all about, first, classroom instruction is the most important factor in student learning. What is the second most important factor? Just pick one there. And then what are the characteristics of a courageous literacy leader?
It looks like about, for the first question, the second most important factor, it looks like we're evenly split between parents who read to their children and leadership. Leadership is slightly ahead at 45%. Second question, characteristics of a courageous literacy leader, 63% say all of the above.
All right, let's look at those answers. Here we go. So, I love that many of you put parents that read to their kid, but actually the research tells us that leadership. Kenneth Leithwood, we're going to look at a quote from him that states that leadership is the factor only second to classroom teaching big. And then all of the above was the answer for those courageous moves. Here is that quote from Kenneth Leithwood. Let's go back to that. Yes, leadership is second only to classroom instruction among all school-related factors that contribute to what students learn at school. This is big. We don't execute on the work unless we know how to lead the work, and we have to lead the work well. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Terry, I just have to say, when I first learned this research, I was actually surprised by this. This is from a Wallace Foundation funded research study, a pretty well designed research study. So this is really important. This is big, Terry. It's big.
Oh my goodness, it is absolutely big. And one of the things that I say all the time is that as administrators, that we got trained in task management. We didn't get educated, mentored, and coached in leadership. And so absolutely. And there is a difference between task management and actually leading the work, showing up every day, being visible, casting a vision, carrying a vision, developing your own personal growth plan. So much goes into actually how we lead the work. Make sure you can Google that Wallace Foundation report and download that report. Yep. So we're going to be talking about some courageous moves. I love talking about leader moves. And one of the things I like to do this juxtaposition between a leader move as opposed to a leader wobble. We all wobble as leaders. As leaders, we misstep, we fall, we fail big time, but we want to make the right moves. And we are going to be talking about moves tonight that are courageous. So some of those things are knowing that all of my kids can be readers and writers. And we've got to do that. Right now, our country is showing that not all children are reading at proficient levels, and it's going to take courage to lead that well. We have to make sure that literacy is not just a single, oh, we're going to put a focus on it this year. Literacy is always a priority. And we're going to understand that the vision, what does it look like, feel like, just how does it mean to show up in a school building where children are reading and writing and talking about culture as well. So we're going to dive into these courageous literacy leader moves.
That's right. And I like to say too, Terry, that, we always have to remember all means all. Right?
All means all.
All means all. We got to hold on to that. Hold on to that.
So let's look at transformational change. Transformational change involves a fundamental shift in the way things are done and our structures. And I'm going to say our systems. I was a part, actually today, this morning, a part of an MTSS event where we were talking about systems. You see, MTSS is the way that the work gets done. I can't execute on the science of reading. I can't execute on systems of care. I can't execute on these things that we need to do in our schools unless we have our systems and structures in place. See, that's where transformational change comes into play. And it's about a vision and a new reality. And I'm not going to accept status quo. Well, we're at 70% reading proficiency. We're way better than that school down the road, Laura. So we're
Yeah.
doing good.
Yeah, but not good enough, Terry.
Yeah, not good enough. Because what if it's your child that's in the
Yeah.
30%? What if that's your baby? What
Mhm.
if that's your sweet baby face that comes home every day? That's the 30% that we are starting to understand that is trauma related to reading, and that if I cannot read, that there is trauma that is going on in my life. All right. So we're about transformational change. We're about not accepting the status quo. We're about seeing something more and before. That's what leaders do. And we do that. John Hattie and his work, Visible Learning and Understanding Collective Effect, we're better together. So that collaborative process that you need to get moving and going, iron sharpens iron. I need Laura on my team, on my side. You need individuals on your side. I was training in Wisconsin about a year ago doing this leadership course, and there was a lady at the back at the end. She raised her hand and she said, "You have made me realize I've been trying to lead literacy all by myself.
Mm,
I can't
mm,
do it by myself."
mm.
And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I want to hug your neck." Because, like, if that's what you took away, then that's beautiful because you're going to
Yeah.
go back and we're going to collaborate together.
Yeah. Very good. Yes. So I'm going to take it from here because
Absolutely.
we're going to talk about how transformational change is really based in the implementation science. And for many of us in education, especially many of us who've been really steeped in the science of reading, we haven't necessarily been steeped in the science of implementation. It's a whole body of research that really is the key to bridging research to practice. So really, it's about methods and techniques to enhance adoption, implementation, or sustainability of an intervention or an innovation that you might be endeavoring in your transformational change for literacy. So you can just go ahead and read this to yourself. This is just this notion that the science is a scientific study. And we know a lot. It's kind of like the science of reading, Terry. We know a lot about what works in implementation. And what's really critical here is implementation allows us to actualize the research. And you mentioned, earlier, we can't just take this body of research called the science of reading and actualize it unless we understand what are the blockers to doing it and how do we overcome those blockers. So I want to talk about some of those right now. When we think about the research to practice gaps in our profession, there are many reasons that those gaps exist. So for example, sometimes we don't move from research to practice because there's a misalignment between what students need and what we're actually doing. Sometimes a wrong program or a wrong practice is selected. It might not fit the needs of students that we're trying to serve. A second reason that there might be a gap between research and practice is that we might have a program or a practice, but we're not using it with integrity. And, I like to use the word integrity rather than fidelity because, and you and I've talked about this, Terry, sometimes fidelity can be misinterpreted as, not veering from the script or just letting the program guide the instruction without nuance. Integrity for me implies that the program is used to support instruction, which is focused on what the students need. Or maybe another reason we have a research to practice gap is sustainability. I wonder if some of you, as you're listening to this is like ringing a bell because oftentimes we bring some innovation in, but it's not sustained. The next new shiny object is brought in to kind of fix the problem. And sometimes it's a new priority or it's a change in leadership that prevents us from sustaining change. Or maybe the program or innovations used with integrity, but it's not to scale. In other words, there are islands of excellence from school to school or even classroom to classroom. So I'm
And
wondering, yeah, go ahead, Terry.
Laura, I just want to comment real quickly on this, the program, the priority, because I think we all have it, initiative fatigue. So I had a colleague, she was working with multiple school district or multiple schools within a district. And so she was doing a training and she said, I just want to learn from y'all how many initiatives you have going on in
Yeah.
your district this year. Got the administrators together, superintendent, principals, directors, all of them together, and had the teachers together. The administrators came up with 3 initiatives that they were rolling out, working on, fully invested in. The teachers came up with 47. Come on. If there's not a misalignment there, I don't know what
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
that takes a courageous leader to uncover the misalignment and do something about it.
That's right. That's right. And acknowledging it really is the first step, right? Why
Yep.
are we? And I think this is really important because I think so many of us, again, we're steeped in the knowledge, the research around the science of reading, and we're not seeing it in practice. And this helps me understand that these are not deliberate, issues here, but sometimes these issues, these factors impact our ability to practice. So once we acknowledge them, then we can do something about it. And here's why this implementation science is so important. So the research has suggested, this is from a Perspectives article back in 2018, without implementation teams using clearly defined implementation methods, it takes 17 years to move half of a new initiative into routine practice. All right, that's a long time without little result. And so when you think about this, if we have well-defined implementation journey, a well-defined implementation plan, well-defined implementation teams, we can move the needle in our initiative 80% in 3 years. Okay, that's a lot more doable for me. I don't know about you, but I don't have 17 years to move an initiative for 50%, right? So this shows us how powerful the implementation science is. And I want to underscore this implementation science with this equation. And this has been adapted from the National Implementation Research Network, or NERN. And it kind of reminds me, Terry, of the simple view of reading because it's multiplicative, it's not additive. In other words, each of these factors that I'm going to share with you integrate with the others to reach our outcome. So let's start there. Let's start with our outcome. What outcomes do we want for our kids? Well, in the area of literacy, I would argue most of us would agree. We want educational equity. We want literacy for all, right? All means all. So what factors does it take to get there? Well, it takes effective practice, which in the case of literacy is evidence-aligned instruction. Instruction that's aligned with what we know about how kids learn to read, when things might go wrong, what we need to do about it. Multiply that by effective implementation, which means we have support to implement this effective instruction, right? And then the enabling context is really about the environment and the setting in which this initiative is in place. So let me unpack it a little bit more. Evidence-aligned instruction, that's principles of instruction, and that's also using effective resources because we have to know the instruction, but we also have to have tools to enact that instruction. Support is obviously implementation teams, systems, professional learning, coaching. These are all supports to implement the instruction. The enabling context, there's several things that go into this, but leadership is really key to the enabling context. Now, I'm going to take you through a fictional school. I'm going to pretend like we're a fictional school, and we're going to give ourselves a percentage. We're going to rate ourselves in each of these areas so that we can see what we mean by a multiplicative equation. So let's say that in our fictional school, we're doing pretty good with principles of instruction, with following the science of reading. But we've got some leftover texts that we used to use during the balanced literacy years that we're not going to let go of those. So I'm going to give us an 80% compliance on this factor. We've got good teacher professional learning, but we just haven't invested in coaching. It's too expensive. So I'm going to give us a 50% on this one. Literacy leadership, we're doing pretty well, except we've had a pretty high turnover of leadership. And it's hard to sustain an initiative with that much turnover. So I'm going to give us a 60%. Well, do the math. What this means is that we have about a 24% chance of reaching our socially significant outcomes. Now, whatever numbers you chose to put here in terms of your own rating of where you are on your transformational journey, the point is we have to be all in. All of these things matter, right? So tonight's webinar is really about this literacy leadership. Now, I think Barbara did you put this in the chat, Barb, the link to this book?
I did.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is the book called The Courage to Lead Literacy, and it's been my privilege to write this book and to collaborate with many other strong leaders like Terry Nolan. And in this book, you can QR code it here, and Barb's also put the link in the chat. Really, this is all about, the importance of literacy leadership, an introduction to the implementation science, like what I just did with you. The second section is about the phases of implementation. And as Terry said, the leader moves in each of those phases. And the third section, we have some experts who have written for us around cultural responsiveness, teacher preparation for our English learners, and we have a whole section of courageous leaders that have simply shared their words of wisdom, in addition to district leaders who have shared their implementation stories. So I hope you will find this helpful to you. Really, it was a labor of love for me. In my current education, I've had the opportunity to learn from so many wise mentors and leaders in the field, and I really wanted to elevate this information and those stories because I know how important leadership is. So again, the second section of the book is about phases of implementation, and that's where we're going right now. So this is a graphic that is taken from the book, and it's designed to represent the journey through those phases of implementation. And I want you to note a couple of design elements here. One is notice that the road starts off the page and continues past the page. And this is done deliberately because it represents a journey that starts where we are and continues on, right? It's also a windy road because the implementation journey isn't a straightforward path. It's filled with twists and turns and sometimes detours. And then the dots along the way just represent some of the milestones when we think about the phases of implementation. So along the bottom, you'll see those phases, and I'm going to turn it over to Terry, who's going to start us on our journey through those phases of implementation.
Well, let's get going. Absolutely. So, phases of implementation, we're going to start with exploration. So, I know that we need to march forward, and we need to make sure that we have those evidence aligned tools, resources, curriculums, assessment protocols, all of those things. And we've got to explore. See, because what happens is this fallacy that let's just pick something and do something. It is the act and do model. The act and do model does not work. I always love telling the story. My daughter is a sixth grade science teacher, and last summer she asked for the new science curriculum over and over and over all summer. When are we going to get it? I need it. I want to plan. I want to prepare. Oh, no, we don't have it yet. We don't have your logins. We don't have the materials. I'm in Texas, friends. Guess where the materials were? It was down at the ag barn. Okay. The ag barn is where the livestock are. So that's where the science materials were. She didn't get the materials until the day before school started. That's an act and do. No, 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 friends. We can't do an act and do. It doesn't serve anybody well. So we got to move into an exploration phase. There are some components. Laura, you're like, oh my goodness, no, that's not good.
That's not going to work. Not going to work for me,
Work.
Terry. Not working.
No. So let's explore the exploration phase and let's look at several components here. Now, my goodness, the book has way more than we can cover tonight. We're just going to highlight in each of the sections a few things. Okay. So in this section, let's look at just some of the things we're going to highlight. They are bolded here for you. So one of the things that I have learned in my career, this first one, be clear on the scope of the initiative. So I have worked with many schools and districts, and we started out, maybe it was state legislation. Maybe it was state legislation that got you going. It was an enabling context. And it was for K-2, PK2. We are going to implement structured literacy for all PK2 assessment protocols. And then you get in and start working with everybody, and they're like, But my upper elementary needs so much support. Oh my goodness, what about my middle school kids? Oh my goodness, what about our high school kids, Laura?
Yeah.
Now listen. We got to make sure that we are serving all students. But a courageous move says, listen, this initiative right here, we are going to stay on scope. See, because there's
Yeah.
something called
Yeah.
scope
Go creep.
creep. Scope creep. We don't want scope creep.
No.
Uh, Scope creep gets too big. Laura and I are going on vacation, and we're just going to take a little weekend trip. And we say we're going to go to the Super Bowl this weekend, and that's it. And then Laura comes to me and says, "But Terry, no, I think we need to jaunt down to Florida as well, and go down there." And I say, Laura, but why don't we stop back through in Tennessee? See that scope creep?
Yeah.
We went outside. Yeah, can't do it.
No.
So the next one, the need for change. The need for change. You have to become acutely aware that you have to change. Margaret Wheatley did an article. This is years ago. I think she wrote it in the 1960s. It was called Willing to be Disturbed. Are you willing to be disturbed? Because if I were to pull the covers back on our data, oh, yikes. It makes me a little bit, ooh, I don't want to look at that. But see, we got to be willing to be disturbed, because when I'm willing to be disturbed, when I'm willing to look at the data deeply, then I know I need to change. So let's move on now to implementation teams. So Laura, let's look at what those teams are. Okay. What teams do you need? I'm going to be quite honest with all of you. I have an unapologetic bias towards literacy. That's my jam. You've seen this saying, that's my jam, and I'm here to spread it. That's my jam. And a year ago, if you would have asked me, setting up literacy teams, and I would have been like, yeah, you're spot on. But because I've learned and I've grown in understanding implementation science, we don't need to stand up literacy teams. We need to stand up leadership teams and implementation teams that know literacy. There's a difference. Yeah, that's big. So we need leadership teams that know how to teach reading. And what I mean by that, do you need to know, all the discrete elements of syntax and morphology and orthographic mapping? Maybe not. But do you need to know it well enough to be able to implement it? Absolutely. We need implementation teams, understanding the implementation science. And if you've got an unapologetic bias towards literacy, get after it. Okay. And then we need our grade level and intervention teams as well in order to make all of these works. And they're working together. It is the synchronicity that needs to happen and moving and jiving together. So we've got to make sure that these teams are in place. And you might be saying to yourself, our school, our district doesn't have this. Then what's the move? You bring it to the attention of whoever it needs to be brought to the attention of, and let's get going. All right, let's look at the next thing, which is understanding vision. Jeff Henderson says this quote. Jeff Henderson is a marketing executive, in fact, for little brands like Chick-fil-A and the Atlanta Braves. So he says, a vision rarely repeated is quickly forgotten. See, Jeff Henderson is the man behind the cow billboards for Chick-fil-A. Okay. What do you think Jeff did in order to carry vision every day? Because he walked the walk, he talked the talk, and he was visible. He showed up, and it was repeated over and over and over. Leaders are repeaters. Patrick Lencioni says he's the author of The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He says that you've got to be a chief reminder officer. So that's what we got to be as leaders.
Yeah. Terry, I got to make a note of someone in the chat wrote for us. Yes, leadership teams that know how to motivate, design, collaborate, etc. and have a passion to improve. And that's from
Oh,
Ken. Hey, Ken, how you doing? That's Ken Kirby. He's going to be joining us on the next webinar. But I love what you
awesome.
just said about leadership teams. It's really critically important. So thanks for dropping that in the chat.
Yep. All right, let's look at a quote from Aaron Lyon here. This is Reed Lyon. Many of you might know Reed Lyon from the research of all these years, and I just love this quote here. Among the most critical determinants of implementation success is implementation leadership, and there is a growing recognition that school leadership is essential for program success. And I just love that Reed Lyon sat on the stage in October at the International Dyslexia Association conference with a teacher talking about how to get the work done. Like, that was powerful. Absolutely powerful. Sat there talking about this isn't just a top down initiative. Oh, y'all go out there and do it. No, this is collective effect.
You bet. All right, let's have them drop in the chat.
Yeah. So, what are some effective ways you have found that you need to elevate the need for change? This is where the power of community comes in and you can learn from one another.
Interrogating. Oh, I love what
Oh,
Katie wrote. Interrogating gaps in data. That is, I love that. I sometimes use the word confront gaps in data, but I love it. It's like, Katie, I'm guessing what you mean is like digging deep, right?
I'm imagining the
Mhm.
police officer with the light bulb above. I'm interrogating you. Like, that's what I'm imagining.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I think somebody else wrote that you have to make the data understandable. That's really true. Yeah. Catherine, parent education. That we need the whole community to wrap around our initiative. Um, find the gaps and in the institution and attack
Yeah.
those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, let's see, presuming positive intent. Thank you. Presuming
Mm-hmm.
positive intent is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
Data, a lot of people are using data, talking about data here. Yeah.
Ooh,
Um,
Kathleen said alignment, horizontal and
yeah.
vertical alignment.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep. And I see people writing about communication. One of the things we write about in the book is who we need to communicate with and how we set up systems for communication. I wish we could dig into that, but we don't have time tonight. So thank you. Yeah. Okay, this is good. Trisha writes about incremental steps of success. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really true with children learning to read, celebrating their incremental steps of success. And it's really important for us in systems change, celebrating incremental steps of success.
Oh, Laura,
Coherence.
Ashley
Mhm,
said invite students in on the data.
mhm. Yes, why not?
Now that is good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
pull back the curtain, right?
Yep.
Coherence between tiers. Thank you, Stephanie. We talk a lot about that in the book, about that alignment, 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 and how critical that is. Great. Well, let's move on. That's really great. We could talk about any one of those topics, but thank you so much for your contributions um, in thinking about how we elevate the need for change in that exploration phase. So now we're going to move on to installation. And installation is really about securing buy-in and support, establishing resources such as curricula and professional learning, really getting tactical with a 2 to 4 year plan, and starting training of all of our people that are involved. And that's why actually we chose the word practitioners here rather than teachers, because everybody needs to be brought on board for an innovation to be successful. So again, we can't talk about every one of these, so we're going to focus on, first of all, we need to think about, are we all in the same boat in the right seats, rowing in the same direction? And if we are, then we build a coherent and focused literacy plan using great assessments. And just like all the other phases, keeping the vision at the forefront. Terry mentioned MTSS. This is the definition of MTSS taken from our Science of Reading Defining Guide at the Reading League. And we're really the essence of this is, I'll let you read the definition, but the essence of this is we want universal screening, we want diagnostic assessments, we want progress monitoring, and they have to be valid, accurate, and useful to us. Decision making should be data based, and everybody in the chat put how important data is. All that data does, all of that data is inform us on what our next steps are. And MTSS is a comprehensive system. right? It's not a singular thing. It's a comprehensive system. So I want to move on and think about some of those concepts and unpack them a little bit. Let's talk about what we mean by tiers of instruction. Let's level set on this. This graphic is designed to kind of showcase what we mean. Tier 1 is that core instruction, and that's for everybody. Tier 2 is a subset of students who receive more intervention, more intensive intervention. And tier 3 is a subset of those students who get even more intensive intervention. And what you see with that upward arrow is that as we move through the tiers, students get more time, intensity, and focus of instruction. So when we think about tiers, it's not replacement instruction that our students in intervention are getting. It's additive instruction because many of them, that's what they need: time, intensity, and a laser focus on the skill gaps that they may have. Another good infographic that I always love to use, and thank you so much, Deb Glazer and Jan Hasbrook, for allowing us to use this. This is the instructional cycle. It's from their excellent book on reading fluency. And it looks like this. We start with high quality evidence aligned tier 1 instruction for everybody. From there, we identify students at risk. From there, we determine those individual needs and plan for tiers 2 and 3. From there, we implement those plans, monitor their progress, and make changes or continue the plan. Now, what's critical is that we have the right assessments to inform each step of this instructional cycle. So we want to make sure that we are screening all of our students with quick, valid, reliable screening assessments to determine those students who are below benchmark. I want to pause here for a minute because a screener also identifies students who are above benchmark. For the purposes of tonight's discussion, we're just going to talk about students who are moving into tiers 2 and 3 intervention, but we also recognize that a good MTS system also includes students that need enrichment and advancement. So nonetheless, screening, that is really taking a look at all of our kids to identify where they are in relationship to benchmark. Once we know the students who are at risk, that's the who. The screener gives us the who. The diagnostics give us the what and the why. What and the why. From that, we can target instruction and then monitor progress very frequently, 3 weeks or maybe even more frequently, to ensure that our kids are not caught in what I call the cul-de-sac of intervention, right? Kids that just keep in that cul-de-sac of intervention. So assessments are really critical. All right, in this phase 2, let's make sure we always remember we're keeping that vision in the forefront. Terry and I are big fans. We're students of John Maxwell, who, if you're not familiar with John Maxwell, he is the world's leading voice in leadership. And what he says here is so true. The vision is not owned by one person. It really is a shared vision. So our drop in the chat prompt for you in the installation phase is, what is your vision for your school community? Maybe you're in the midst of transformational change. Maybe you're in the midst of a literacy initiative. What is your vision for your school community? Success for all students. Yeah. Leadership, moving into the science of reading. That's a great vision. And that's a doable vision. Focused for students beyond students. Oh, I love that. Students go beyond their goals. All hands on deck. Yes. In collaboration. Yes, for all. Good. Common goal. Higher to, yeah, alignment of learning in each grade. These are great. Changing the trajectory of our scholars' lives through literacy. That's so true. Yes, the question about differentiation. Yeah. Yes, that diagnostic assessments are really helping us differentiate that additional instruction that kids are getting. Yeah. Somebody mentioned here in their response about changing students' lives. Terry, it's not hyperbole to say that literacy is a major life factor, right? Like I always say, I want to contribute in any way I can to ensure that all students learn to read so they can be contributing members of the 21st century and lead a joyful life, a joyfully literate life. So thank you for
literacy can heal children. I worked with a colleague. She lost her mother when she was 8 years old, and you know what healed her? So of course she was sad forever. You've lost a mother at 8 years old, but you know what healed her? Books. Healed her.
Yeah.
Yep.
I believe
Absolutely.
that. I believe that. All
Yep.
right, thank you so much for your contributions, Terry. I'm going to turn it over to you because now you're going to be talking about initial implementation.
Here we go. Let's get into this initial implementation phase. Absolutely. So let's look at the components that are a part of this initial implementation. We've explored, we're getting things ready with the installation phase, and now we're in the initial implementation phase. Once again, too many for us to cover. They're all in the book, but let's look at the ones through highlighting. So we talked about systems and MTSS. I've said it, Laura said it. MTSS is the only way to get the work done. You cannot be implementing the science of reading unless you got your MTSS protocols in place, unless you have your systems aligned. It has to be true. Adam Grant, in his book Atomic Habits, said, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Let me give you an example. So let's say that, yeah, our data is suggesting that we've got children that are not meeting all of the foundational skills for word recognition. Our data tells us that. We've done screeners, we've done diagnostic. Our data is telling that. But my system, which is my schedule, which is supporting that, is not allowing me the time to target instruction. See, I will never advance far. I'll never get there. See, because my system just limited me. Yeah, big. So systems is a really, really big one. Another one is about the data. Let's look at some components of this data, because data is a system as well. So advance that slide, Laura, and let's talk about data for a minute. We've been talking about data a little bit, that universal screener, and then those diagnostics. Let me ask you this question. Do you have assessment protocols for every grade level? You know what? If you don't, then say to yourself, that's a courageous leader move. We're going to put assessment protocols in place for every grade level, meaning universal screener. What happens when that child in the universal screener is screening low? What do we do next? What do we do next? What do we do next? Is that written down? Is that visible? Does everybody know it, understand it, know how to execute on it? See, that data-based decision making says that we have made the leader moves to execute on all of those things, that we are teaming together around the data. I've even heard schools that in a very private, secure room that is locked, they get those school pictures of those babies and they put them on the wall. And we know, and we move them up when we do our middle of the year data checks and progress monitoring, and we can see the progress. See, that's visible. That's data-based decision making. We don't apply instruction until we know what the data tells us. So data, huge. All right, another component in this phase as well is our professional learning. And I'm going to go out on a limb, friends, and I'm going to say, I think I'm going to rename professional learning. I'm just kind of over professional learning. And
Okay.
Laura, you're like, what are you saying
You
right
heard
now in
it.
this
We're
webinar?
hearing it here first, people. Terry, what you got?
Let's think about its personal growth.
Mm.
Professional learning indicates that I got to check the box and I got to show up and I got to get my certificate and all those things. No, I'm in it to win it. This is about personal growth for me. This is about committing at a level that is beyond just baseline expectations. So anyway, you can agree with me or not, Laura.
I agree with you in concept, but I'm not going to change. I'm not going to go through and take professional.
No, don't take it out.
You're not
Don't
going to do
take
it.
it out.
Not going to
All
do it.
right, let's look at
All
some
right.
components of professional learning checklist. Guess what? My professional learning has to be evidence aligned. It's got to be the current research and practice. If we're not staying up on it, I'm going to tell you what, these scientists and these professors and researchers, they're getting it. As far as the research, we got to stay up. That culturally relevant pedagogy, that ongoing training and coaching. We're going to be talking about coaching in just a minute. Also, more things to consider. Every teacher is a reading teacher. Science teachers, You're reading teachers,
Mhm.
science teachers. Do you not understand the importance of the Greek and Latin roots when it comes to science terminology? Like, come on, that's where we can really nail it. Professional learning has to be ongoing, long term, have those communities. We just learn better when we're in a community. And this last one is so near and dear to my heart.
Mm.
In order to lead literacy well, I gotta know literacy. I gotta know the science of reading. And so it's called this law of proximity, which says if I'm not close to the problem, I can't help solve the problem. Get close to the problem.
Yeah.
Every week I sit in front of children and teach them to read because I want to stay close to the problem. Yep.
Yeah.
So
I
that
love that.
professional learning checklist.
I
All right,
love
let's
that.
look.
Terry,
Go ahead, Laura.
before we get to the drop in the chat, I just want to
Yeah.
mention in the book, some of you might know Mitchell Brookins, and in the book, Mitchell has written a lovely, lovely piece on culturally relevant pedagogy. And I was also in conversation with him in a webinar that we did last year, Barbara, wasn't it? Last year we did the whole Courageous Leadership webinar series, and I was in conversation with him. And so it's a really wonderful webinar to go back and look at our archives and
Mhm.
also to read about in the Courage to Lead book. And of course, I was also at a webinar with courageous leaders, Terry Nolan and Danielle Thompson, which you can also find in the archives. All right, moving along. Here we go, Terry.
Moving along. Okay, let's do a little bit of prompting here because we're about to move into coaching. But before we get there, you tell me why you believe coaching is so important.
Some of you may have had coaches. Some of
Yep.
you
Maybe are a coach.
maybe are a coach, right?
Yep.
Yeah, support along the way, guidance.
Guidance.
Mm-hmm. Yep, to support. Yeah, to get to 90%. Yes, to get to implementation, moving from theory to practice, right? Transfer to practice, right? Exactly. That's why
Jonathan said side by side. There you go,
yes.
Jonathan.
That's why, when you go back to that implementation equation, Terry, coaching is right there because
Mm-hmm.
it really is part of that whole equation for success. Oh, advocate, that's good to tell you. It gives you a positivity, a positive partner, a willing positive partner to advocate for students and teachers, but it also gives you additional viewpoints. That's fantastic. Love it, love it. Matt, this is awesome. All right, Terry, we're moving on.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, you know as well as I do, when the funding needs to, we got to cut funding, what happens? Our coaches go. And that is a leader fail. It's a leader fail. Because here's why. Atul Gawande says no matter how well trained people are, few can sustain their best performance on their own.
Mm,
That's where coaching comes in. Now, Atul Gawande is a medical doctor. And he has, and it's on the screen. I'm just dropping it in the chat. You can just Google the coach in the operating room, and his article is going to come up. It's kind of lengthy, but it's a brilliant read. And Atul Gawande said he was at the top of his game when it came to surgeries in our country, at the top of his game. And the way he knew it is by the reported infections that patients got after surgeries, because doctors have to do the follow up and all of that, and it's reported and tracked. And he had the lowest incidence of reported infections after his surgeries. He was a brilliant surgeon. But then he got to a point and he stalled. And his results were kind of hanging out there with
mm,
everybody else. And see, he got to this point and he couldn't get past and he couldn't go further. And that's when he realized he needed a coach.
yeah.
He needed somebody to come along, as Jonathan said, side by side. And like I said, brilliant read and the applications to education. He even talks about education in that article. We got to have coaches because we can't reach our highest potential without somebody coming along right beside us. Even Joyce and Showers point this out. Many of us know the work of Joyce and Showers. I mean, I just love this. Okay, so if we're just going to talk theory all day, then my knowledge 10%, skill 5%, transfer to practice. You'll never transfer to practice.
Mm-mm.
Never. Demonstration my knowledge goes up, my skill goes up, but still it never transfers to practice because I'm watching you do it. Practice where I do it, starting to get there. And then when a coach comes alongside me, that's where you see this monumental growth in transfer to practice. The Joyce and Showers work is foundational for taking to a leader when they're ready to cut coaching. Look, we're not going to get better. We got to have coaches.
That's right. That's right, Terry.
All right. So here's another area in which we need to ensure is that we're going to make those courageous moves around selecting our resources in this phase. Okay. And let's look at some of those moves as it relates to evidence. Okay. And also, I just love the second bullet here, pulling weeds and planting flowers. Laura described this earlier when she was telling about the school. Oh, I still got some of those texts and resources that I just love them, Laura. I just love them, and we haven't
Can't let them
repurposed them.
go.
Yeah, I don't want to let them go. I love the you know, the valley and all of that, the all of that up on my walls. I love it, but I'm just gonna hang on to that word wall so tight because I love it too, Laura. So, but we've got to be able to pull the weeds and plant flowers.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Around our resources as well. We can't just keep adding on. This is where the initiative fatigue comes into play. I'm listening to this Audible book, Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud, and he's talking about pruning. We got to prune. We're embarking on spring. If you don't get out there and prune those rose bushes, you're not going to have a healthy rose bush. We got to prune and we got to shed and we got to get rid of so many things. And we've got to select the right curricular tools that are evidence-based. Yep.
That's right.
So let's look at the definition here of evidence aligned and evidence-based. Okay. Because we got to know the difference. This is a discerning factor, a decision-making factor for leaders. Evidence aligned, uncompromising alignment to the vast body of knowledge known as the science of reading. A commitment to following the sciences of learning, teaching, and implementation. That is evidence aligned. We have aligned our curricular tools, resources to the evidence. Evidence-based. What does that mean? It's proven. Research to the point of randomized controlled trials. Like we've gotten in there and we've done the work, evidence that a program or methodology works with students. When you are selecting curricular tools, resources, supports, assessments, we have to be the discerners of evidence-based and evidence aligned. That's a big part of this process.
Yeah.
Yep. Here is the efficacy studies. You see that QR code for the 95% group and their tools and resources that are available for you as well. And of course, many of us know Emily Hanford. She did the Soul Story podcast. Evidence studies are expensive and difficult to do, especially the kinds of studies that can actually show you if a program works. Most programs don't get studied like this. Guys, 95% Group has a commitment to this, and you can download with that QR code and just see that commitment.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Terry. That's so important, isn't it? Because we really want, and like you said, we have to be discerning consumers, not falling for labeling, but really be discerning about what's aligned with the evidence and what's proven.
Anybody can put a science reading sticker on something.
Yes, doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah,
just does not. All right. So as we're wrapping up, I know we're kind of running short on time here, but real quickly, in the full implementation phase, that's when we have fidelity to the initiative, right? We're committed to that initiative and we're looking to maintain that initiative. And we as educators within that initiative are using the innovation or the intervention that we've chosen. So just a couple of leader moves here. We want to protect that vision, and we want to inspect what we expect. And we want to keep a pulse on school culture. And we want to be reflective. And I wish I could unpack every single one of these, but we're just going to have to leave you with a couple. know, of course, that the book goes into detail, more detail on each of these, but inspect what you expect. Really simply, that means that we as leaders, and this could also be reflecting on our own practice. Are we using the curriculum resources with integrity? Are we using evidence-aligned practices with precision? Are we using that data? Do we have the supports in place so that we can continue to have success? And are we looking at the data to make sure that the data is moving in the right direction, and that if we have gaps in data, that those gaps are closing? Also, I'm a firm believer that really, as a leader, we cannot accomplish anything if we don't have a healthy culture. And so this is just kind of some indicators of what makes a healthy school culture, or what a healthy school culture looks like, sounds like, feels like. And number 6, sometimes I think we forget, we're in schools with students. It should be a place of joyful optimism, hope, and learning. And that's an indicator of a healthy school culture. I love this quote by Costin Garmston about teaching. And teaching is very complex. But what makes our profession so impactful and profound and rewarding is that we have opportunities to be learners, to be curious, to expand our own knowledge and practice and keep growing. Oftentimes I say, Terry, if I'm on a webinar and I'm saying the same thing I said, a year ago, shame on me. And a year from now, I better be saying something different than I'm saying now. Shame on me, right? We're just constantly learning, growing, and refining our practice, and doing all of it honestly with a lens of humility, to know that that the inquiry and the curiosity will drive us to a higher level in our practice. All right, Terry.
All right. Oh my goodness. My goodness. So much information. Sustainability. We got it all moving. We got it all working together. That synchronicity of this work is happening. Now we got to sustain it. And where we are at this point, remember down at the bottom, 2 to 4 years, 2 to 4 years. We are not sitting here saying today, well, Laura, next week, they just need to have all this figured out and in sustainability phase. No, sustainability. Let's talk about that for a couple of minutes here. This is where the continual professional learning, and also I got to hire good people. And maybe they don't know the science of reading, but maybe they have an appetite for growth. I want that person. We've got to train and retain the best and understand and know who is so willing to show up every day in love and joy and learning and teach our children. We have to make sure that that is happening all along the way. I love this quote by John Maxwell. A leader is great not because of his or her power, but because of his or her ability to empower others. See, you sustain the work because great leaders make great leaders. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to make you great. Another quote by John Maxwell: a transformational leader is someone who influences people to think, to speak, and to act in such a way that it makes a positive impact in their lives and the lives of others. Remember, we started with transformational change, and that is also where we want to leave you with understanding transformational leadership. Drop in the chat box for us as we wrap up here tonight. What resonated with you? What questions do you still have? What's your next best step? Whatever is just popping in your brain right now, we'd love to see it. Y'all have been so good tonight, so engaged.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for
know.
participating. We really appreciate you and your participation. Read the book. Oh, thank you, Ashley.
Oh, the change model. Anna really loved that change model. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Margie, yes, the first 2 recordings. Barbara can answer that question for you.
Jody's motivated. Come on, Jody, let's go.
Hey, somebody said, I wish the leaders in my district were on this webinar. You know what? Take the recording. There you
That's
go.
right.
Yeah, or
That's
just give them the QR code. Send them to the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. And I always like to say, Terry, we can only take the next best step, right?
Yeah.
We can't we have to think forward, and we have to think with the end in mind, but we can only take our next best step. That's what we really have to focus on. So So hopefully this webinar was helpful to you when you think about and all the things that we brought up tonight. I know we threw a lot of information here, but hopefully it just will intrigue you to maybe read the book and learn some stories of other leaders. So what I want you to think about, though, and you don't have to put anything in the chat, but I do think the whole point of this is to ask ourselves this question: what would it be like if all the students in your schools were readers? What would it be like for your school, your community, your state, our country, the world, if our students were joyfully literate? And that's what we're all about. That's what all these efforts are really designed to help us do.
Oh, Laura,
Yes.
Edna said it would be a paradise.
It would be a paradise. Agreed.
That is beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Edna. And I wanted to say, you know what, Terry, you mentioned Margaret Wheatley. You
Yes.
know, long, long ago, when I would think I was just starting my own journey as a leader, I read Turning to One Another, her book, Turning to One Another. That is a great book, especially in today's climate. I think it's a great, if any of you are familiar with that, um, or not familiar with it, check it out. It's called Turning to One Another by Margaret Wheatley. All right.
Yep.
Anyway, moving on. So this is, as Barbara said, the third in a four-part series around implementation. And May 15th, I will be joined by Ken Kirby, who's on the webinar tonight. Hey, Ken. Talking about protecting the science of reading investment from a leader standpoint. Like, we've invested in building knowledge and professional learning and resources. What do we need to do to protect that? The other three webinars in this series, including the one that Terry and I have done tonight, will be available on, well, the first two are available on demand now. This one will be available on demand soon. On February 20th, Thursday, February 20th, please join Dr. Deb Glazer, who will be talking about morphology. 95% Group is now the proud owner of Morphine Magic. And we are so proud to represent Deb's work in Morphine Magic by having this wonderful product in our portfolio, in our literacy ecosystem. So please join for a meet and greet with Dr. Deb to answer all your questions about morphology. Here's a QR code to register for either of those events right here. And come on down to Kansas City. Join Terry and me in Kansas City, because on April 1st and 2nd, we are going to have a 2-day extravaganza about building a literacy vision. And we're going to take a lot of the things we talked about today and really flesh them out. It's going to be participatory. It's going to be fun. And bring your teams. This is what we really want. We want teams of leaders and teachers and coaches and just teams from schools or teams from districts to come together and really think about, how do we apply this learning to our work in systemic change. So Terry, I don't know about you, but I'm just like so jazzed up about this.
I'm seriously, I'm jazzed up about it. So Laura and I, we get a little bit fired up. So if you're in the room with us, I'm going to tell you what, we're going to get a little bit fired up. So
we are going to get fired up.
Yeah.
It's
going to be fabulous.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight. Here's our contact information. This is the contact information for Terry and myself, but also if you're interested in 95% Group products and services, these are all of our wonderful account associates and account executives around the country. You can reach out to any one of those that is connected to your state or region and find out more information about 95% Group and our wonderful products and services that I'm very proud to represent. Thank you again. We appreciate you all so much. You gave up an hour of your valuable personal time for this personal growth, and we are so honored and humbled by that. Barbara, thank you for all your organization. We couldn't do it without you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and a wonderful weekend. Thanks again for the work that you do. We're so proud to be able to support you. Take care.
Thank you all. Such wonderful comments. Thank you.
Thank you.